I think if you can get really clear on what is it that you want, what are your values for your family, where are you going, what does your future look like, and then essentially sort of planning for that. And if travel is, you know, that big passion, that big value that you want, it's then really prioritizing that and going, okay, so if we really want to do this, we can, but then what else are we sacrificing? And so I think if you can get really clear as a family on what you want, you can make anything happen. It's just having that sort of real clear focus and knowing sort of what levers you can pull to be able to make it happen.
Welcome to the Get Rich Slow Club. I'm Anna, and I'm joined by Lauren Lee, who is a travel and cash flow coach who focuses on sorting out your finances so you can travel more and create priceless memories as a family, or even as an individual, because a lot of this is probably applicable, right, Lauren?
Absolutely.
Before we get started, I'd love to hear, what's your money win or loss of the week?
My money win would definitely be earning over 20,000 flybuys points last week, which then we converted into velocity points so we can travel more.
Wow. How did you earn so many points?
So every now and again, if you shop through Coles, you might get an email where they've got a bit of a special where if you shop with them to a certain point, and the amount is different for everyone, it kind of depends on your spending. But for us, if you spent $200 every week for 4 weeks, they gave you a bonus 20,000 flybuys points. And I was like, well, we pretty well spend that every week anyway. So we just made sure we capitalized on that. And then that gets converted to velocity points, and they convert at 0.5 to the 1 flybuys point. So we got 10,000 velocity points, which can pretty well get us a return flight just for me, just for one person, from Adelaide to Melbourne for free.
Amazing. And this is obviously something that you pay attention to as someone who is an avid traveler, right?
Absolutely. We're always looking for ways to, I suppose, keep the expense of travel down so we can do more of it, especially with the kids. So any way we can sort of hack the system and earn more points to make those flights cheaper, we jump on. Absolutely.
Yeah. And Lauren, you wear a lot of hats. You're a traveler. You refer to yourself as the family CFO, so the chief financial officer. You're a business owner. You're a seniors mathematics teacher, and obviously a mom as well. I know that the part that I'm always most excited about is talking about traveling. And we already started talking about traveling. It's often perceived as being really, really expensive. And you've talked a little bit about how you travel hack already with points. And it's a really great way to think about travel. What do you think some of the biggest misconceptions are when talking about traveling, or especially like with a family, because it does get expensive?
Yeah, I totally agree. It's definitely expensive, especially I think also since COVID. Now, for us, that kind of aligns with when we had our kids. So for us, travel got more expensive anyway because we had kids, but I feel like the cost of travel has definitely gone up. And then I feel like the biggest misconception, or what I get from people a lot of the time, is why would we travel with our kids when they're young? They're not going to remember it. What's the purpose? Why are you doing it? And I suppose I see that side. Like I can't sort of project 30 years into the future and ask my kids then and go, oh, do you remember when we went to Bali when you were 3? And maybe they will, maybe they won't. But I know now, like for reference, my kids are 5. We've done a few overseas trips already, and they still talk about Bali when they were 3. They still remember things. Different things pop up and they're like, oh, Mum, remember when we were on that plane and we we're going here? And they love now talking about the world and looking at world maps. And I know for me personally, smells is such a big thing. So while they might not necessarily remember all the intricate details, I know they're picking up so many skills. They're learning so many different things. They're seeing more culture. And I think for us, it's really them experiencing the world and also then identifying how lucky and grateful they should be that they're Australian and we live here. And while the world is such an amazing place, we are so lucky to be where we are. So I suppose that's where I sort of come back from when I get those comments around why are you traveling, like why are you, I suppose, wasting your money when they're not going to remember it, when I feel like, yeah, they're going to remember bits and pieces and it's going to form who they are. And I think that's so important.
I often think of it as the building blocks, right? Like it's the same thing as teaching your kids about money. They're not going to learn how to budget and save right off the bat. But if you're already just talking about math or showing them numbers or showing them coins or talk about, hey, this is just isn't in our budget right now, they're starting to learn from that. And similar to travel, I feel very similarly to you in the fact that I have family in Canada and in Croatia. And even if they might not remember everything, there's the smells, the feeling of love, like being surrounded by family, being on a plane. And then there's the selfish side of it. I want to travel. So do I have to wait until my kids are 10 years old to travel? Or can we do it when when they're younger? So that's the big thing for me. Yeah.
Absolutely agree. There is definitely that selfish side. There is part of me that was a bit bummed that during COVID, like we had plans to travel when they were really young, when essentially they were free to take on the plane. Because I have twins too, I should say. There's two of them, which now is double the cost. But there was always these plans to be like, cool, before they're two, we can travel. They're free on the planes. Things are going to be great. And then obviously that didn't occur. But very much the same. We want to be able to travel. I love to travel. So why wouldn't I, expose my kids to that? And as you said, I think all those things around money and budgeting as well, like we talk very openly, like if they talk about, we've had recently, like, we want a new car, Mum, because a few of their friends have got new cars. And I sort of explain, well, if we want a new car, we could potentially look at doing that, but then we can't go on as many holidays and we can't go on as many planes. And what do you think about that? And so getting them to sort of, I suppose, already think about what's the payoff depending on what we try and do as a family.
Yeah, those conversations are so important because if you want the new car, we can have the new car, but then we can't go to Bali or we can't go on a road trip or whatever it might be. I know there might be people who are listening who don't have a family, but who are thinking about a family, and it can get expensive. So what are some of the easiest ways to cut down those expenses? I think you named one, which is like traveling when Bub is brand new and free on the plane. I know I was in a similar situation to you in terms of COVID. I couldn't travel with my first, but my second, we got to travel, I guess, for free with the Bub in tow. So that's definitely something to think about. But what are some of the other ways that you can cut down on expenses when it comes to traveling?
So I think the big one that I've already sort of mentioned that I'll talk about, and then I've got some others, is utilizing points where you can. I'm a big advocate for them. I know there's people out there that say they're not worth it, but I suppose it's really how you look at things. And if you're spending money on things that you're already going to be spending money on, such as groceries, and you're not then overextending yourself to chase points, but you're just in the background collecting them, you can then definitely, reduce the cost of flights. So, for example, we used points to go to Thailand earlier in the year, and we got to fly on Singapore Airlines from Adelaide to Phuket, which, much nicer than our budget-friendly airlines, and it cost us like 25,000 points per person. So I think it was just over 100,000 points, and that got us there one way for pretty well next to nothing. I think it was about $400 worth of taxes. So that just helped keep our costs down to get over there. So that's definitely one strategy.
So Lauren, when you do that, do you specifically look for the points that you can get from the grocery shops? Do you look at credit cards? Is it all of the above? Like for anyone who's like, I don't even know where to start. Where is a place? Where's a good place to start?
Yeah, so I think a good place, depending on your financial situation, is always just using, those reward systems through grocery stores, like your flybuys, if you're shopping at Coles, your everyday rewards through Woolies. Again, it depends, I suppose, if you have a preferred airline and who you want to fly with, because each of them are affiliated with the different airline groups. So Flybuys being connected to Velocity, which is Virgin, and Everyday Rewards being connected to Qantas. So it's a good place to start. The other thing we do, and it is a bit of a controversial one, I suppose, in the financial world, is we use our credit cards as well. So we essentially run everything through our credit cards that also earns frequent flyer points. And then we have a system in check where we pay it all off every pay. So we're not, going into debt to use our credit cards. We're just using it as a system to maximize our frequent flyer points.
Yeah, perfect. And you know how the different grocery stores have their preferred airlines? Do you think about that ahead of time? You're like, hey, I want to go to Phuket, so I'm specifically going to go to this grocery store in order to utilize those points. Or are you like, I'm going to just collect them all and then figure it out? How does that work for you?
So I think everyone does it differently and it depends on their circumstances. But for us, where we are, we really only have a Coles close by. And so we basically do everything through Velocity and we plan through our flights through Virgin. And I also think back when we first started this, which would have been like over 10 years ago, I found the majority of the time we were flying Virgin or Virgin Alliance Airlines more often. It just seemed to be how it was. I think back then Virgin was cheaper to fly than Qantas. I think it probably still is to an extent. And so we've sort of capitalized on just going all in on that airline and their alliance airlines across the world. And then how we best utilize our points is we also use an online platform. I don't know if you've heard of it, Seats Aero, where you can essentially look for flights, but instead of looking for them in terms of price, you look at them in terms of points. And it can show you when the best days or the best times to fly with your particular airline for the least amount of points. And so that helps us really maximize getting the best use out of them.
Amazing. And I know you help couples and families kind of hack all of this as well. They come and talk to you about it. What are some other ways that people can cut down on expenses? So that was a really great one. Points is a huge one because the travel is often the biggest cost. Are there other considerations that people should take into account?
So I think a really tricky one can be accommodation. We know that can be a really, big expense for travel as well. And it's really trying to find a balance between what's going to work for your family. Now, in an ideal world, we've got twin boys who are 5. We'd probably look to go a 2-bedroom apartment if we could, or something with a separate bedroom. However, we know sometimes that can be such a, it can be double, almost triple the price to get that. So sometimes we go, you know what, we're just going to get a room with 2 double beds, and the twins can have one, we can have one, and we just make that work. And we understand that, hey, you know what, we're probably going to go to bed earlier while we're on holidays, but that's not a bad thing because the days
you're exhausted.
The days are huge. So that's one sort of scenario we've definitely used to kind of keep costs down. We did that recently when we went to Thailand and Singapore. And another way we try and look at it is we love to road trip. So we can sometimes find scenarios where it's cheaper to hire a motorhome and all sort of bunk in the motorhome together and travel around that way than it is to, hire a car and stay in accommodation. So there are another 2 ways I think we've really sort of kept costs down to kind of afford and be able to really enjoy the travel that we're doing without, I suppose, breaking the bank.
Yeah, for sure. Another one that I love to do is often we'll have a meal or 2 at home before going and adventuring. Sometimes food can get really expensive or you start to get hangry and then you're at the mercy of what's around you. But that's always a good one too, to cook your breakfast at home, have breakfast at home before you take off. That makes it a little bit more financially viable, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've done that as well when we've motorhomed. We have the cooking facilities. And then an interesting one recently, we've only just explored this sort of scenario of travel. When we went to Thailand, we did have an all-inclusive, it was half board. It wasn't all-inclusive, but it was a half board resort, which meant we got breakfast and then we either got lunch or dinner. And lunch and dinner was slightly different. So, of course, I sort of looked at the options and thought, what's best here? Like, where do we, I suppose, capitalize on what we spent? And we found out if we had lunch there, we got huge value for money. And it worked out really well because it was so hot as well. And the kids, they don't love being in the heat for ages. So it meant we could sort of enjoy breakfast, have some time in the pool, have lunch, and then sort of late afternoon we'd head out and explore sort of more of Thailand and then go and get, a cheap dinner out. And that worked out much better than if we had to go out all the time and find food out and about.
Very clever. So you work with a lot of families. What are some of the most common cash flow mistakes you see families making, especially when they want to travel? So of course, there's a desire potentially to travel or go on an adventure, but cash flow is really tight when you have a family, right? You have childcare fees, you have school fees. It just costs so much. So how do you help these families? Like, what are some of the most common mistakes you see when it comes to the cash flow?
I think it's really not having a clear picture on what it is they sort of want in life in general. I think if you can get really clear on what is it that you want, what are your values for your family, where are you going, what does your future look like, and then essentially sort of planning for that. And if travel is, that big passion, that big value that you want, it's then really prioritizing that. And going, okay, so if we really want to do this, we can, but then what else are we sacrificing? And sacrificing could be in terms of cutting expenses. Sacrificing could be in terms of time and trying to increase your income. I suppose there's, quite a few different ways you can go about that. But I think if travel is something that you so desperately want to do, I think it does really need to be prioritized. Otherwise, it is, I suppose, seen as a luxury. It really is. Like, I feel so grateful and lucky that we're able to do it, but we prioritize that. And we sacrifice in other ways to be able to make that work. And so I think if you can get really clear as a family on what you want, you can make anything happen. It's just having that sort of real clear focus and knowing sort of what levers you can pull to be able to make it happen.
Yeah, that clarity is really important. I know for me, it's a non-negotiable to see my family. And my goal currently, while my parents are alive, is to try to see them at least once a year if I can. Very ambitious. Sometimes, COVID hits or who knows what, and you just can't do that. But that's like the non-negotiable in our budget. And I know often I'll be like, oh, wouldn't it be nice to like go over to Bali? Like there's some cheap flights. And my partner will then say to me, what is your priority? Do you want to go on a trip to Bali or somewhere like local? But if it doesn't matter because then we have to give up the trip to go see your family. And so those are the trade-offs that happen quite a bit in our house as well. And right now, I know my partner's talking about going to meet up with some friends in Thailand who are all inviting him to meet up with them and have a bit of a boys' getaway. And I'm trying to enable that and support that. But he's like, if I go, then we can't do like the other trip. So knowing the desires or the wants of your family, or even if you're coupled, or even as an individual, right, is so crucial, because something else has got to give, right? And some of the things that we've given up has been eating out. Like we will just make food at home and it adds up after a while. So it's, I'd like to go out for a nice meal sometimes, but the desire to travel is bigger for me.
Absolutely.
Do you find that that's hard for people to kind of talk about what their goals are?
I think so. I think I've said previously to people, I think as a society and as a culture, we've forgotten how to dream a little bit. Like if I ask people what they really want, a lot of the time it's a nicer house or a new car. And I'm like, yeah, those things are great. But is that, truly what you want? Like, what if we talk even longer term? Like, you're 50, 60, 70, or you're, that analogy of you're sitting on your rocking chair on your porch when you're 85 and you're reflecting back on life, what is it that you're going to regret or that you haven't done? So really allowing people to really sort of get clear. And I think that's what we did as a family as well. Having kids was the impetus for that, like getting really sort of clear on what we want, how we want to sort of work as a family, what experiences do we want to have. And that helped us to get really clear, and much like you, not sort of eating out all the time. I remember when I actually really dug into our finances and I was like, oh my God, that is an expense that creeps up without you even knowing very, very quickly. And I was like, if we can just keep this under control, and it's not that we don't, we just limit it. Like we've got a set amount of money every fortnight that we can spend on, if we want to get takeaway, we can, if we've got that money there. But I suppose as similar to you, it's just a bit of give or take. Like I feel like you can have everything in life. Sometimes you just can't have it all at the same time. So it's really finding that balance. Yeah,
exactly. I know that you also have a lot of money mindset things that you needed to overcome as well. We've previously talked, or I don't know if we've talked actually about it, but I've heard you maybe on another podcast actually talking about how you've come to have your own understanding with money from your childhood. And I think that this is so interesting because as parents, we can't help but reflect of how we were raised as kids when it comes to money. Can you talk a little bit about that, Lauren?
Yeah, so I think if I go back to sort of my money story quickly, I grew up mostly with a single mum. Like my parents split when they were 5. The main reason they split was my father was a gambler, so many financial money issues. Mum was never, and she's happy for me to say this, she was never very good with money. I still very distinctly remember as a child her asking to borrow money from my money box and then saying she'll pay it back on Thursday. And reflecting on that, I remember Thursday was payday. So that was on weeks where she couldn't get through the week and so needed to borrow money from my little money box to get us through until Thursday. And I think sort of seeing that or I suppose taking that in as a child, I sort of went the complete opposite. And I suppose in some ways people would say I was lucky in a sense because I was more of, I suppose, a hoarder of money. I was one that I would, earn money from work and then never spend. I think my first ever part-time job, I think I worked for 3 months before I spent a cent of it. And I bought a watch. I still remember buying that watch. And I think it's taken a lot for me to try and unpack that and change that a little bit because I had the mindset for a long time that I was going to save my way to buying a house. Well, that's probably never going to happen, especially if things like COVID and house prices double. Like there's no way realistically that a normal person can save to not have a mortgage. So, there's been work there to sort of, I suppose, let money go. And it's funny, the only thing I can think back to sort of in my 20s and stuff that I was able to happily spend, and I still would always second guess it as I was purchasing things, was travel. So even when we'd purchase the flights or I'd go confirm, I'd always be like, do we want to, should I be spending this money? And so it's just interesting. I was probably, more of a hoarder than a spender, I suppose.
Yeah. Did you have to unpack a lot of that as well over the years?
Yeah, I think especially sort of since having the kids and knowing that I didn't want to go back to work as a teacher full time and knowing that I suppose money was going to be a little bit tighter, shall we say. Like prior to kids, hubby and I were both working full time. So we didn't have to look at our finances that closely. And we knew that we could be, saving quite well and doing quite well. And then having the kids and knowing that money was going to be tight, but also then understanding that if we wanted to really, I suppose, prioritize our future and prioritize travel, I couldn't hold all the money as well. We've started to get into investing and doing all of that. So we're still, prioritizing our future while still doing now, but it means I'm not holding on to all the money and just keeping it in a savings account, a rainy day that might never come kind of thing. So, working through that continually, I suppose, educating myself, looking at working with a financial advisor has been great for us, but, also consuming a lot of content, books, talking to you, seeing other people's perspectives. And I think it also just comes back to having clarity on what you really want from life, and sort of going all in on that.
Yeah, we all have like financial baggage of some sort. And our kids are going to as well, because they're going to pick up stuff from us, and who knows what they pick up. They might be really fantastic habits. They might be not so fantastic habits. And also we're just all individual people, as I'm sure you have two kids that are probably quite different from each other, as mine are. I'm assuming they're twins, but often everyone has their own personality, right?
Absolutely.
It's interesting because we all have our own individual hangups. One of the things that you said that I thought was so fascinating was that you wanted to save your way to a house. And I cannot imagine saving $600,000 or $1 million, depending on where you live in Australia, for your own home. I'm assuming then it was very hard for you to kind of navigate the world of being like, all right, I'll have to take on debt in order to buy a house, or potentially even invest, because investing is also, yes, your money is growing, but you are spending your money to purchase an income producing asset. How did you navigate that?
Oh, it's a really interesting one. And I feel like every time I am on a podcast or I talk about it, I unpack more of it. So I think if we just go back to the house scenario, being a maths teacher, I did, I suppose, what we'd say, more sort of engineering level maths in school to become a maths teacher. And it wasn't until I actually started teaching and I had, I suppose, a business maths subject, and we looked at home loans. And it's the first time I really looked at it and understood it. And I realized that people get a mortgage and they pay for their house twice, if not 3 times, by the time they paid their interest. And I was just like, oh my God, that is the biggest rort I've ever heard. Like, no wonder the banks are so rich. And so I got in my head that I was like, well, I don't want to do that. There's no way I want to do that. So I was like, I'm saving my way to a house. And then at that period of time, I was actually living in regional South Australia as a teacher. Rent was subsidised. We were paying next to nothing for rent. So we had this opportunity to really save. So in my brain, I was like, mathematically, we could do this. However, life, things get thrown at you. We didn't have the best work-life balance up there. And so we decided to make the call. My husband is also a teacher. That's how we met, to move back to Adelaide. And when we moved and we had to rent here, it was like triple for what we were used to. And I was like, what is this? Like, this is so expensive in comparison to what we had. So we had people live with us and we kept that cost down. Then we knew we wanted to have kids. And it's like, well, we probably can't really be in a share house if we have kids. It's probably not fair on them. And at that time, interest rates were so low. And what we were paying in rent would have been the same as a mortgage. And so then I suppose my mathematical brain was like, why am I paying someone else's mortgage when we could pay for our own? And it was in that sort of sense I made that decision. It was like, right, let's just do this, because it would actually be cheaper to purchase than it was to rent at that time. And just through making that decision, we were incredibly lucky, and I'm incredibly grateful that we purchased before COVID and we've managed to luck out. And so our house has gone up. But yes, I've come to terms with the fact I'll have to pay for it twice over.
Do you think you would have come to the same decision if interest rates were high or higher?
Maybe not. Probably not. If we'd stayed in the country, probably not. I think it's just things that happen. And at the time we sort of adapt. And it was really, another part of it was we moved back to Adelaide. We were living in the suburbs, which I didn't love. I think I'm more of a country girl. I kind of grew up in the country. And then my husband took me away for a weekend in the Adelaide Hills, which is not far from the city. We're about 20 minutes out of the city. And I was like, wow, I feel like I'm living in a little country town. And it was that weekend. It was September. I remember it was September 2019. We went away. It was a Friday night. And I was like, we're moving to the hills. And that next day we started looking at houses and we purchased in November. So in some ways I can be really sort of calculating around decisions, but I think when we've just decided and we know this is going to be best for where we're heading, we just kind of make it and we do it. And some people are like, oh my God, you just went and bought a house all within like a month and a half, because settlement was November. But in the end it worked out so well. And then I suppose alongside that, it's then learning about investing.
Yeah. How is it with investing for you?
Well, I think it was really sort of understanding, like I went through a phase. I think we all probably go through a phase at some point where I'm like, I want to be financially free and I want to be retired at 45, because that's what I felt like. I was burnt out from teaching. I just had the kids. I was like, I don't know where life is going. Like, let's just get to a point where work is optional. And so I was like, well, how can we make that happen? And I very quickly realized that saving my way to that wasn't going to work either. And so it was actually when I had time, when my kids were born, we spent a lot of time in the car because I slept in the car. And so I listened to a lot of podcasts and started learning. And I suppose a bit of my own money story back to my beautiful mum. She always used to say that her understanding of the stock market was it was gambling. And I suppose having a gambling father, I was like, well, we don't go near there. And it wasn't until I actually sort of really looked into it and started doing it. It wasn't until I was 30. But, do I sort of look at that and go, I wish I'd learned earlier? Absolutely. But I'm so glad I still learned when I was 30. And that's when we sort of started that journey and realized that we need to be investing, or we need to be looking towards our future if we want to have a really good retirement, or if we really even want to hit this financial freedom. Now, on the journey, I've realized that I'm not going to hit financial freedom at 45, and that's okay, because I've got a fantastic balance now, working part-time as a teacher, having a business, which was, I suppose I've always had side hustles and have been doing things, but I was really encouraged to continue with the business because business income is uncapped, whereas teachers, we are capped. And we realize that with capped income, we're not going to be able to hit financial freedom by 45. So it's like, well, let's look into businesses and see what we can do, but also around the flexibility just with the kids. So, now I have the flexibility to be able to drop them at school and pick them up most days, which is just something I think I feel so grateful and lucky for, that we sort of created this lifestyle through, I suppose, taking on debt and taking on risk, which I would have said, previously very risk adverse, where now I think learning more and doing more things, like we're actually probably not so risk adverse as what I first thought. So just being aware of all those things and continually learning, I think, is so important.
Yeah, perspective changes, doesn't it? I think my perspective was very different when I was younger because I felt like I could take more risks. I didn't have to look after anyone. I didn't have to do anything. And one of the biggest advice I would give someone who's thinking of having a family is build as much wealth, climb the corporate ladder, get as high of an income as you possibly can to get yourself ahead, because it does unfortunately get harder. It gets more expensive as you have a family. And I wish I was kind of doing that by myself. But I wish someone actually told me that, because I would have then maybe thought about it more. Like subconsciously, I was like, I remember when I was pregnant with my first kid, I got a raise the same day that I told everyone that I was expecting, and I was trying to climb the corporate ladder, because the more money you can make, the more you can invest, the more time you have for it to compound, because life did change for me too. I work part-time now. I'm building the life that I love. Similarly to you, it's not a race to the finish line of being like, I want to reach financial independence, because I am building the life that I love. I love that I get to work part-time. I get to work part-time at Perler and do the podcast and do all these amazing things. I get to side hustle on the side, do some money coaching, do a course. But the most important thing, as I think you mentioned as well, is being able to be there for the pickups and the drop-offs, being able to spend time reading together with the kids, taking them to the playground, jumping on the trampoline. That's why we do those things. Now, not everyone is in that situation where you can. Like sometimes you learn about financial independence further down the track, you're in more debt. It's harder. But to your point, learning and never stopping, like never not learning is so crucial, right? Like you're a testament to that as well. If not, you'd be still saving in the bank account and not have a house and not have investments, right?
Absolutely. And I think it's really interesting listening to your story as well. And I think it's made me realize that you can start whenever you need to. So I suppose I look back on my, money mindset, and maybe, as I said, I was maybe a bit lucky because I was a hoarder and not a spender. So I didn't get myself into debt prior to kids. But prior to kids, I wasn't really thinking about our retirement either. And it's just been sort of since having kids that's been the real big impetus on, looking at what does our future look like? What do we want it to look like? And then starting on our investing journey. So, for us, a lot of people would go, oh, well, you started late. You started at 30. But I'm so glad we did start at 30 and we're not, 35, 36, 40 before we're starting. What will I tell my kids? Start as early as you can, obviously, because, we know time in the market is so important. So, yeah, I think it's just understanding where your journey's at, and not reflection was always so good, but not beating yourself up on maybe decisions you made when you were younger, because you're still just learning who you are. and what you're about. So sure, when I was at uni or first started teaching, I could have just, saved or done more, but I don't regret any of it. And I'm just so glad that through this learning, we can then start this next phase and make, those tough calls to what's best for the family. Because I know hubby and I have definitely had conversations being financially, if I just went at the moment and taught full time, I'd earn more than what I do sort of part time in my business. Not by much, but I would. And in some ways financially, that would be great. Maybe that would speed up having larger investments, but it's not worth the stress. It's not worth the time away from the kids. So it's really then, I suppose, looking at what we've created now and being so grateful for that, and knowing that we might be slower to hit some of our goals, but knowing that the journey is going to be so much better than, I suppose, sprinting towards the goals and then absolutely burning out and hating life on the way.
Yeah, 100%. I know, same situation on our end. In fact, that if I were to be working full time, I'd be the higher income earner. And often I get asked like, well, how come you guys didn't swap? And it was just priorities, right? Like, we're just different people. My partner went to school as an older student, you know what I mean? And therefore are earlier in their career, whereas I've been in my career for a while. And the trade-off is that I'm happy to take that time off, and financially we can. Is it the best financial outcome for us mathematically when you run the numbers? No, it makes sense for me to work full time. But you don't always do things because they mathematically make sense. You do things because of your desire, your whys, your needs, and even the emotional side, right? Like in the sense where a lot of people want to have a home for security, as opposed to actually the numbers and building wealth. So it's okay to have those trade-offs as long as you're thinking about them holistically and figuring out what works for you, right?
Yeah. And I think it's so crucial that you just continue to hold on to your values and who you are, because it's so easy to get caught up in the noise and get caught up in what everyone else is doing and then compare yourself. And then sometimes be like, oh, I should be further ahead. Why am I not? Negative mindsets creep in, and then maybe some spending happens, and then you kind of get further away from your goals, not to mention the advertising out there and keeping up with the Joneses and wanting to be seen as something. So I think, ultimately it comes back to just being really clear on what you want as a family unit, or what you want as an individual, because that's still important too. And really just leaning into that when there's, some decisions to be made around who's working, what do finances look like, and then communicating about it as well with your partner. Because, I know my hubby, he's the one that calls me the chief financial officer, and he's happy for me to just run things, but it's always, communicating with him where we're at, what's going on, what does he think of this situation, so we're all on the same page.
Yeah, for sure. I often think about keeping up with the Joneses, and I joke around with my partner that we have the ugliest house on the nicest block. Our neighbors just redid their yard, and I was like, oh, it's just like, it looks so good. Like all these native plants. How much did it cost? Oh, $20,000. And I'm like, oh, I can't imagine spending that much money on my front yard, because it's just not a priority. And then when you think it over, it's like, my neighbors are closer to retirement. They have adult children. Who am I to compare with the Joneses? And that's the thing. I think you said, like, you started investing later in life in your 30s. There are people listening who are maybe in their 40s and are like, oh, is it too late for me? Or in their 50s, or people like, we get messages all the time being like, I'm 20. I feel like it's too late for me to start investing. And it's like, you are not everyone else. Stop comparing yourself to everyone else. We are all in different positions in our lives. Some of us have financial literacy. Some of us have support from our families. Some of us are in debt. And some of us had made choices that were not optimal for us. But guess what? Like, tomorrow is a new day. You get to start. You get to make the life that you want. So like, stop looking at the $20,000 yard next door. Just focus on you and your goals. Is that my priority? No, my priority is to travel. Like, I would have such a nice trip on $20,000 instead of my beautiful native garden, which I would love to have, but not as much as traveling.
Absolutely. And I think it's just run your own race.
Yeah.
And we've got friends, they're about to get their brand new Tesla. And again, that moment of being like, oh, they're getting a Tesla. And we're similar. We probably have the smallest house on our street. And we have so many people go, you're going to outgrow it. I'm like, are we? We've still got 3 bedrooms. It's small. It doesn't take me long to clean. Like, again, it's just, I suppose, reducing the noise and that you hear and sort of getting sucked in and being like, no, these are our priorities. This is what we're going after. And this is what will make our family, I suppose, the happiest it can be.
Yeah, having your own vision board and knowing what you want, your why, your life, not what your neighbors are doing.
Yeah.
Love that.
And then also understanding that can change too, because I think sometimes we get on this journey of what you want and what you're after, and then we hold on to that so tight when we actually learn that that's probably not what we want anymore. We grow, we evolve. And so it's okay to change that. And it's okay if you decide, you know what, I've had enough traveling. Maybe I do want the Tesla. That's okay too. It's just figuring out what the dreams and the goals are.
Lauren, it's been such a pleasure. Where can people find you?
So come and find me on Instagram. It's Lauren J. Lee on Instagram. That's where you'll find me.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for joining us. If you found this episode helpful, please rate us 5 stars, write a review, or share with a friend. If you're new to investing, make sure to listen to our first 10 episodes. Follow us at Get Rich Slow Club or Tash at Tash Invests or me at Ana Cristina.
The Get Rich Slow Club podcast is a collaboration between Tash Etchman from Tash Invest and Ana Cristina from Perla. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to investing. So make sure you check out our financial services guides and read the product disclosure statement and target market determination for any investments you're considering. See our show notes for more info. Any advice is general and does not consider your financial situation, needs, or objectives, so consider whether it's appropriate for you. This show was brought to you by Natasha Etchman, who is an authorized representative 1299881 of Guideway Financial Services, AFSL 420367, and Perla, who is an authorized representative 1281540 of Sanlam Private Wealth, AFSL 337927. The Get Rich Slow Club acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land we record on. From coast to coast, across land, waters, and communities, we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging.